All right, I have 5:30. I will call the work session for Monday, October 7th to order. Let's see, we're going to put the speed update in the fast track and make that number 1. So, Mr. Mareck, Commander Wollin?
Yeah, so happy to welcome back Commander Michael Wollin with the Sheriff's Office. If you remember this summer, Mayor and Council, Commander Wollin was out. We started talking about a conversation related to speed. Part of it was related to conversations that councils had a number of times related to speed limits, primarily neighborhoods. And so one of the to-dos from that was to ask the Sheriff's Office for enhanced patrol. I would say almost like a patrol wave, I think Commander Wollin had mentioned, related to tracking speed. We, as you see in your packet, we put a notice out into the newsletter and social media platforms related to kind of an extra eye on speeds and driver safety throughout the summer. So Commander Wollin is back to continue the conversation, share the reports. I'd also mention that this is probably a multiple phase approach. So not only enforcement, but the city, since that time, we've put a new digital speed sign on westbound Spring Creek Drive in that area where we had some residents connect with the city council last year, and then also 2 new speed signs, digital speed signs in conjunction with the 4th Street West pavement project on 2 different parts of 4th Street. And then we also did a striping project along Spring Creek Drive. It now has a center line stripe, and then there's a double yellow striped along that curve where people kind of try to cut over a little quicker to get quicker through that kind of, is that S curve probably, along Spring Creek Drive. So again, probably multiple approaches, but with that, I'll let Commander Wollin kind of run through or walk through the data slowly.
Speed through it?
Thank you.
No.
I just more favor the puns
Yeah,
than
right.
the speed at which.
So as Brent said, you're aware we had that conversation kind of I think in June or prior to June that we would be coming and focusing on enforcement way for speed from July through basically the summer. So we carried that through September 3rd. If you hadn't seen, I think I'd put it, maybe it's in your packets or whatnot, number of stops, 58, number of cites we issued for speed were 11. We issued a number of different warnings, and those are included, but I won't go. They did include 16 for speed. Equipment, stop signs, registration, plate violations, no proofs. When I had some conversation with Brent earlier, I think there was a question as it relates to where some of that enforcement activity was taking place. It's just like location specific, so I did work with our records to get some of that data with that as far as locations. If you're curious, I can hand that out. You'll see it carries, so when I asked records to run it through, I said September 3rd, but she must have just heard September, so it's carrying it through the 25th. So anything above the orange line, just disregard the dates, will go up to the 3rd. And with, so I'm sorry, I'm passing that around. And yep. So you'll see that number will be a little bit higher of 38 speed when it should be 30. That's data after the 3rd. So we look at speed, what we try to do, obviously addressing behaviors. I'm not aware during the speed wave of any new complaints that had come through to Brent, or if council had received any specific that maybe didn't make it my way. With that, it was, when we look at speed, what we're trying to do, change in behaviors, public safety within the community, we look at it as a, when we look at accident data and different things, typically whether it's speed or distraction or inattention, distraction, speed, and impairment. We can see that we had 5 PD accidents in Carver and largely none really where we would look at factors of speed being a contributing factor. The hit and run vehicle, obviously we don't know, but mailbox failed to yield in a roundabout, neighbor backing into a car, hit and run of a sign. And then there was 1 PI accident, which was a rear end collision at Ironwood and JCP with the notation of what would be kind of inattention distraction where the driver was noted to have fallen asleep. With that, so that's a little bit of data specific that way. So some feedback from our team. kind of midway about the progress with it. I think we looked at some of the challenges that they were facing was the ability to conceal themselves or whatnot. When you look for an enforcement piece of things, you're trying to catch people doing it versus the visibility can be a deterrent in itself to slow speeds down. So that was a little bit of the feedback that way. When I looked at some of the data Brent had shared on the installation of signs and different things, I think that's encouraging. In a sense, when we look at overall, the average speed appears to be, at least in those locations that I have from Ironwood and Spring Creek, in that the average speed is at least for Spring Creek, 24, traveling well below the posted speed. With that, there'll be different things, and I have to look at it a little bit more on times when we look at high speeds and different things. I know when we've had speed trailers out and different things, depending on the time of night, you'll get people just to see how high they can get it as well. And is that an accurate depiction of traffic activity within the area? So I'm encouraged by looking at those things on the speed average overall that we are looking to be below, at or below the posted speed. With that, I don't know if council had any questions in relation to activity, things like that, any feedback you might have seen from the citizenry of seeing the deputies on directed patrol or in those enhancement activities. Any feedback from the kind of the education or the kind of the precursor of posting the notice and then we're going to be doing it, if the community was receptive to that feedback or if there was overall anything that you received.
Just a quick question before we
Yep.
go in. So it doesn't have the speed on this one, but we connect the incident number to the incident number here.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can, yeah, and I know, like I say, it was when Brent had asked me earlier about specific, I wasn't sure if we could capture that, so I had to work with records to try to get as creative as we could, because I don't know that our system is constructed that way in the RMS system to just generate that type of data.
No,
So,
that's fine, I can do the work. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
wasn't missing
yeah,
anything.
and I apologize, I think my count might be off when I look at that report versus this data and this report, where I think I said 11 and you might count 12 in there for citations. With that, so that's the thing too with the system, if something pulled or something got processed after I ran the report or whatnot.
Okay, I'm
Just
okay
wanted
with
to
the
let you know.
snapshot. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Questions, Commander Wollin?
I don't know that I have a question about the speed. I'm surprised that there are only 11 citations in a 2-month period of time. And did I hear you say that the average speed is lower than posted?
Well, that was taken from the reports that I got from Brent in relation to the digital speed signs, I believe is what they are and where they're posted for those locations. And with that, again, we had 16 warnings, if you remember from our discussion when Mr. Anderson was here as well, when we talked about where our threshold was at for citations and looking at really 10 or more, knowing that when we look at kind of the teeth of it and from a prosecutorial standpoint or a conviction standpoint, the judges really, the courts would laugh us out in a better sense if we're 2-3 miles an hour over. So again, and it's when we're looking at the resources that we have and allocated during as time and resources allow and things like that with what we have for our deputies and spreading the coverage across with partnership as well. So
Surprised doesn't mean I expected, we should have more. I'm just surprised what the results were, that it was lower than what I would have expected. I know we didn't ask you for this, but how about distracted driving, using a cell phone or something like that?
I can run that report. I'm not able to do it now, but I can follow up on that data.
Just off the cuff, do you have a sense, is it a high percentage of the people that you pull over? Or
I can't say that, and I wouldn't want to speculate as far as I can tell you that it's a much more prevalent issue. I think then, I don't want to say with speed, but I mean, I have a vehicle that's not marked up, and I can tell you that when I'm driving to and from work,
We don't post signs for that.
Yeah, but I can tell you that I can see people are using an electronic communication device regularly, and so we do, as part of TZD initiatives and partnership on the Towards Zero Death initiative, where that's grant funding from the Office of Traffic Safety through the state, which is ultimately through NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic Safety Bid, where we have additional shifts that are funded specific to distracted driving enforcement. And our TZD coordinator, Sergeant Staub, will look to, look at our traffic data, our collision data, crash data, and stuff like that, and look at where our crashes are occurring, and then if factors are identified through the course of the investigation, and looking at that data to see where we're getting it. But largely, it's a lot on our highways and things like that. But I would tell you that I think it seems to be noticeable. I'm sure you've been out and about as well, or in the course of regular travels to see it. Again, a little bit of the crash data and the time period when we looked at what I had attached there. When we looked at kind of falling asleep separately, but some of those things, whether it's backing into a car or even failing to yield in a roundabout, depending on what that is, there could be some distraction piece in there of what that looks like, whether they're looking at a communication device while they're trying to enter, or people have a difficult time navigating roundabouts too.
Well, thank you for the extra information. I didn't mean that.
Yeah. So, but if you'd like, I can look to generate a report to see on at least citation activity on what it could generate as it relates to that code. I believe it's something that we track because it's one of those pieces that's part of our overall grant reporting to the state when we do those enhanced waves, like in April and different things where you got distracted driving mobilizations where the entire state is on board with it, with that enhanced mobilization. So I can look to get that data.
Well, I'm happy to know that there's enhanced enforcement and funding for that, because I think that's at least as dangerous as speeding.
Yes.
All right, fine.
I
Move on.
have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So when we had talked the last time, July was kind of going to be our big speed month. And so when I was looking at this, it looked like we had 16 people that were pulled over for traffic in the month of July, but there was only 2 tickets issued. So I'm just, help me understand why there was only that many issued when we, as a council, really pushed that was going to be our month to hit hard. Because we've noticed it to the residents in the newsletter, July's our month. And then of the 16 stops, it looks like only 2 were actually cited.
Again, it may be within their discretion or what they were stopping for. If they were under that threshold of 10 and they were given warnings, we had some staffing transitions through that time as well. But I can't, speak specifically. Our team had the work direction and the expectation where it was, the vehicles that they were stopping or whatnot, without having some specific speeds noted beyond what is under the citation piece of things. I would have liked to see more as well.
Ray, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just, so 11, that's, in 3 months, that's less than 1 per week, right? So that doesn't seem like a big number. Is that, do you have any idea what it was the previous months, or just in general, is that for a city our size or other cities in Carver County, is that typical, or?
Well, I would say that historically, my time within the sheriff's office, we've been more on the education.
Okay.
Versus an enforcement and an overall citation activity. At least I think we've probably been around 25%. That means we're stopping 1 in 4, or citing 1 in 4 when it comes to that. So
which is about what it is, 40 to 10, roughly.
Right, and so that's
Okay.
somewhat organizationally overall, at least from my time, and I've been with the sheriff's office
Yeah.
here 20 years, that we've roughly been around that 25%. And that has been either under previous leadership, previous sheriffs, where, the direction was, didn't have a desire to really come to it. I mean, we do that through, TZD mobilizations and different things, increase in the citation counts and things like that. But I can speak to it from historically that we've roughly been around 25%, and we very much worked on the education piece of things to educate motorists, slow down, change in driving behaviors, and then we look at other things as it relates to crash data and whatnot, and what are our crashes? What are they the results of? Are they the result of speed? Are they the result of impairment? Are they the result of distracted? And a lot of the data, at least specific to Carver, doesn't show that our crashes are as a result of speed.
So then, just kind of follow up on the very high speed one, right? If they're 15 to, over, that just in the normal course of not, right? If they see someone, right, they just probably get pulled over regardless of whether or not it's an initiative, right? I mean, those, right, those kind of outlier high ones seem like that would be.
That we would be
Right,
speeding.
we're trying to,
Yes.
do a push, right, so maybe
Correct.
more accurate for the,
Yep.
5 to 10, but if, it's significant, right, that would be ticketed regardless, right, whether or not we're emphasizing or.
Well, I'd like to believe that, when they're targeting, and if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, that's right.
Leaning over
Yeah,
that way
no.
with where they're at. I mean, some of the 39s, when I patrolled, I was writing it down under 10, but largely I might have stopped them and gave them a speed break and knocked it down. That's trying to be, they do have that discretion to, so say they stopped them for 15 over, but they wrote it under 10.
Gotcha.
There's a change in fine
Fine,
amounts,
okay.
there's a change in things like that. And so what we're trying to
That's
do
good.
to change behaviors, whether that's speed breaks, but 14 over, 20 over is a really good one. I mean, they're moving.
Yeah.
And so I think the expectation and the understanding that they would have had with speeds of that high is really a zero tolerance, and more of our stops understanding what the initiative was to focus on speed, but it could have been under 10 miles an hour. And
Right,
emphasizing the education.
Exactly,
piece of
okay.
things, with that versus the enforcement to, show that we are targeting, that's not the right word, that we are increasing or emphasizing
Yep.
the, speed mobilization here, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
I just follow up, so
Yeah.
the 39 and the 30, these numbers are what they were cited for. Somebody could
Correct.
have been going 45 and
Correct.
30, but, okay.
Correct, they can get speed breaks. Yep.
Maria, any questions?
No.
I think, you brought up a good point. I feel like last summer we were hearing from folks, we had a cycle there where we heard from folks in our community
Mhm.
every meeting or every other meeting about people are going too fast. And I don't think that those folks would come back and say, no, we're good, this problem has been solved.
Right.
But it's good to see the data. This was a special initiative for the summer. I think maybe stereotypically and maybe anecdotally, folks go a little bit faster in the summer when you can. The pavement's dry and you can roll down the windows and crank up the music. Is this something that we can continue to push? Was this taking folks off of their regular duties? Was this a heavy lift?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would have to look at overall, all of them, there's a calls for service, but they focus that when the time and CFS allows, and also have to look at it when the increased traffic volumes. So I know they're probably trying to get it more during those peak times or peak traffic times, which are more during the day than your late night or evening hours when you're going to sit in a residential neighborhood to focus when there's really no cars. So we know that daytimes are typically busy, but I can't say that it was a heavy lift, but it's manageable, I think, between the calls for service. I mean, if we wanted more of a dedicated effort and different things, then we talk about what we have currently for resource allocation and things like that too. So.
I would love to keep the pedal down on this and really focus on speed enforcement in Carver, full stop. You know how and I think I said this when we met in June, but you know how you don't speed on the crosstown through Edina because there's somebody sitting there. You know how you don't speed through 100 in St. Louis Park or 494 through Plymouth. Like, I would love Carver to have that reputation. You don't speed through Carver because you are going to get busted and you are going to get a ticket.
And we have had, I would add, we've had some transition in staffing as well within Carver as well. And I think, newer deputies being assigned to it or coming out of field training, because I shared that data with them as well. And I think they probably saw what maybe some of the partners have been doing too and thought, hey, I can help with this or I can do better as well. Deputy Dylan West is now our Team 2 deputy that manages Carver. Deputy Tyler Nelson, who have both shown to be very active, very responsive to these things during the course of their shifts, which are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., managing around calls and things like that. So I will keep that information to them, and I can run another report post September 3rd to date as well, and see where we're at for some data after the fact too, on having some transition in staffing as well. So
One more point I'd like to make, when we were talking about citations, I don't know that having 11 citations represents any kind of failure in this effort. I see a lot of interactions that change behavior. So I want to be sure that we're not saying issue more citations. I think each one of these interactions achieved the goal. So,
and I would say, like, the presence in the area as well, and not being concealed, visibility is a deterrence as well.
yeah.
And so unfortunately that's data that you can't capture unless you hear it, anecdotally from your citizens, or you just say, hey, I saw a squad sitting there, and everybody's.
You need an undercover Toyota.
Well, we do have, the sheriff's office was aware, and we were waiting the receipt of the vehicle, but through the Office of Traffic Safety as well, we applied for a traffic safety vehicle. And so that is basically a limited markup, a fold-up marked up vehicle. They use it a lot. I don't know, you can go on Care 11 and look for the past story. I think Richfield has it in partnership with some of those West Metro suburbs, and they focus it a lot on the distracted driving piece of things with that, outfitted with cameras out the sides and can catch things. And so we were awarded a grant through the OTS, and so that vehicle is in the order phase with the dealer now. We'll look to be upfitting that and implementing that into our patrol feed as well when we and so when we have some of those mobilizations, whether it's distracted or it can be available for city elected directors too, in city areas as well. With that, we were also on the traffic safety piece of things recently, a number of weeks ago, awarded a grant through the OTS for a DUI or a traffic safety officer, and so you'll see probably some similar stories through the OTS if it's on media from Eden Prairie or other agencies where it's a dedicated officer specific to impaired driving enforcement, and so that's what they thrive on, and they're really getting after it when it comes to impairment.
Go ahead.
So, and a lot of these look like they're on Main Street or up by maybe Ironwood. Is that where they sat mainly? Do you have that data where they chose to kind of?
I don't, but I can follow up with both Dylan and Tyler and kind of what strategies they use to try to sit in different locations. Are you wondering where they're sitting to slow down yourself?
That's what
I actually don't have to leave very much all the time, so. Yes, please no.
Yeah.
No, I would like to know, just because it does seem like we caught a lot on those sections, and maybe that's just a spot where people tend to speed, so.
And it could be a spot where they found it better to conceal themselves
That's
as
what I
well.
was gonna ask.
And felt that this was a spot where, it could yield some results and feeling like, they had the work direction they needed results to show for. So.
Okay, thanks. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
I don't speed either, by the way. Except on 62 going 3 minutes.
But just once, and you know how long to do it, I'm telling you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Brent, I don't know if there's anything else that comes up after discussion.
Thank you.
I hope you all have a great night.
Yeah,
Thank you. Don't speak.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a burnout right there.
I feel like we should wait for that. Okay, up next we have City Manager's Report, Mr. Mareck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. So some items to go through and do a few. Recall we've been spending or ramping up our time related to the future needs of public services and future water treatment plan. Looking to try to find some sites to present to the council. Kind of as an offshoot before I get to the main topic here, we had initially planned to kind of run through some of those sites with the council in early November. We're rescheduling that. We have sites that we think check some boxes, but we want to do some more due diligence. If you can think of, like infrastructure costs, wetlands, soil types. We want to provide a more complete picture to you on all of these sites before kind of bringing them to you with, and there'll obviously be questions about each of them and different dynamics, but the more that we can answer for you initially, the better off we'll be. I spent some time with Aaron Schmidt and one of their mappers, is that an official term? Yeah. And just kind of went through some things. So as it relates to that, the main story is space needs. If you remember, back in, I think it was 2021, the city hired Wollin to do a space study related to public services. One of the goals of that study that the council had laid out was to find a site that the city already owns. So it was kind of predicated on our existing site. And as the more that we go over possibilities for sites, I have a lingering anxiety that our space needs identified in that study are biased to the site that we had, meaning that we can build 25,000 square feet because that's the amount of space we had available. So adding on to this kind of story, I've connected with a lot of colleagues throughout the metro, and long story short, I'm interested in connecting with Ortel Architects. They've done a number of public works facilities throughout the metro, and getting a proposal from them to basically refresh our space study. We have some different staff on our team now, and even if it's just to verify that the 25,000 is what we need, I just think it'd be a good exercise to make sure that if you're gonna make an investment of several million dollars in a property, that you understand the layering effects of what size of building. You know, we could build X amount of square feet today, and this would last us 5 years. And if we build Y square feet, it would last us 20 years. And I don't believe that we have enough information right now in current documents to let you go through that exercise. And so I wanted to check in before I went too far down the road with Ortel. Obviously, I'd bring that back to you for approval and consideration, but before I went too far, I wanted to check in and make sure I had your support in going through that exercise.
Does anyone have any concerns?
I don't.
I don't have concerns, I have one question. Is this what was gonna be in the early November meeting? Isn't it like in a work session?
No, the early November meeting was, so we have 4 sites that we think are potential considerations for the actual property. This is more related to the building that you would put on the selected property.
Okay.
And, you know, if we find out that 25,000 isn't the number, that may impact your decision on what size property.
Okay.
Either less or more. And then, you know, depending upon the configuration of the property, that might dictate how you would expand a building. And so getting back to that original premise of giving you the most information when you start to review, it would be nice to have, I think, if I was in your position, to have an updated space study along with all the characteristics of these 4 different sites. Not that you have to make a decision that first night, but at least I think it sets a solid foundation for questions and additional information that you might want to ask before you make a final decision.
I have one really quick, so as we look to the future, well, obviously, we're gonna need more space, but when you're talking with these folks, we're not gonna be compared to like, you know, Minneapolis or Bloomington, you know, where they say, oh, we need 70,000 square feet or something like that. Like how are we gonna see little apples to apples?
Yeah, so that's just the experience they've had, so that's where the space study really comes in. So they'll, you know, and Ortel actually, for I think maybe Christy and Courtney might remember them. So they did our space study in 2013 when we were originally looking at spaces for City Hall. So actually their architect that I connected with, who worked in Carver in 2013, is now the president of Ortel Architects. But long story short, they'll go through our spaces, and you know, because of their experience, they'll be able to say, well, okay, if you want to house everything that you have in your buildings today and the stuff that you have outside, you need X amount of square feet. And then through a combination of looking at our growth and our capital plan for equipment, they can chart that out. So it's not, they're not gonna say, well, Carver has 20,000 and we did a facility, they did Maconia's, and Maconia has this, so they must need this. It's a lot more granular than that, where they look at our existing space, equipment, vehicles, what we have in our capital plan, what our growth rate is. And I think it's a lot more nuanced, so it's not so cookie cutter.
Okay, great, thanks.
So to summarize, we'd basically be taking a clean sheet, look at everything we have based on our current capital, and then kind of tell them.
Yeah, I shared with them the space needs report that we did with Woll 3 years ago. And so this is what we have, but could you help us develop a proposal that would kind of refresh this or whatever process, I'm not sure what process they are going to recommend. It's just that anxiety piece of going through this exercise, building a 25,000 square foot building, and then 3 or 4 years later coming back and saying,
We should have.
why is that new payloader parked outside? I think we want to know with no doubt that this is the size building that we need for today, and then to whatever extent you want to build out for, whether that's 5 years or 10 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
That's your
totally
choice,
makes
cut
sense
once.
to me. Exactly.
Well said.
I think that's Brenton. No, that's Brenton for me.
Cannabis zoning review process, so this is something that Aaron Smith and Dave Anderson are working on, so we have to adopt zoning rules for cannabis businesses by year's end. Meaning you have to have some type of zoning, doesn't mean it tells you what specific zoning you need to have. The primary question is, do you want to establish distances from a cannabis retailer? So rather than presenting the council with an ordinance that says there are none, or there's an ordinance with some distances, or these conceptual pieces to invite residents to come to a listening session where the council doesn't comment, but you just hear what residents have to say. We take notes from that, memorialize it, and then send that to the planning commission for them to draft up an ordinance based on those comments and whatever comments the council would have, and then bringing that back, so that would go to the November planning commission meeting and then land it with the city council in December. So, but before we embarked on that schedule, I wanted to make sure that was in keeping with how you wanted this process handled. Or if you felt strongly one way or the other on a direction, you could certainly say, no, we want to have it written and drafted this way. We don't need to go through that. We're happy to follow that direction as well.
How does this follow the county limit? Is it 11 for Carver County?
Yeah, so this isn't, correct, this isn't related to the number, this is related to the
Just distance between?
zoning, correct.
Okay.
So you have to permit it somewhere in your community, but there are standards that you could choose to implement that are required to be, and I don't have the exact distances, but distances away from parks where there are amenities, where
Sure.
Children may congregate, schools and daycares are the 3 primary pieces. So you can either choose to implement that setback, if you will, or not to. So that's the main decision point. There's obviously maybe some other pieces, but that's the primary thing that the council is going to need to adopt via an ordinance by year's end.
I have a question on that. Is there also decision that has to be made on like permitting fees or?
That will come at a later date, but that's not, it doesn't need to be established by year's end. There, the state, as you might have read, they're still kind of hashing.
Okay.
Working through that. That was unintended, maybe.
So this is only for retail, right? Not any
Correct.
other grower or processing, anything like
Correct,
that?
this is just a retail cannabis establishment, dispensary.
Okay.
This is a little bit detailed, but are there provisions in there that have to do with like owning a building or renting a building? I mean, I think we know right here downtown, we obviously have people who are owning a building now, right?
It doesn't matter if they own it rented or leased it, it's just the operation is
Okay.
where the setback from.
The only reason, I guess, that I'm asking is because if, let's just use this for an example, we have one that's owned, right? And so right now we have a daycare across the street. But when we have rental units, they can change hands. So how do, if we say, okay, you can be here, but you can't be, obviously this
But not
hasn't been a problem, but I'm just using this as an example. There's a childcare center across the street, but they came in after this business was there. How do you say, oh, sorry, sell your building now, there's a daycare in here? Or whatever it might be, that's
Yeah,
something.
I know like afterwards we'd have to connect with Dave. I know prior to, so there, we don't have any right now. So if you adopted it, it would impact somebody from potentially, like whether it's the Nest River Wild or ODB Kids or Next Steps. If you adopted this, then someone couldn't open a cannabis retail dispensary within that prescribed setback. After the ordinance was established and let's say a daycare moved in right next to them, that's a great question, but I don't have the answer. We'd have to
Okay.
ask Dave.
And we don't have anything like that for liquor stores, do we?
Correct.
Okay.
We don't. So the question is, you want to go through the listening session step before it goes to planning commission, or would you rather?
I would like the listening
Yeah.
session.
That's fine.
Yes.
That's a really good point.
Any feedback is good feedback.
Then moving on, so street maintenance project preview. So Aaron's just going to be giving you an overview of the 2025 street project. So some streets in the Bluffs neighborhood as well as the last part of Sunny Ridge Drive heading up the cul-de-sac. So we are working on, as you can remember, we have kind of a tradition of doing kind of a wandering open house. So we kind of meet in those neighborhoods and ask people to come out and give some feedback. So we're going to give an overview. We'll have at this point, probably the open house after the council gets the preview. The Les Schwab and Carver Commons project and plat are coming to your October 21st meeting. Bluff Park and CC United. CC United has some new leadership. It happens to be a Carver resident. So they've been engaging us related to the use of Bluff Park. We did communicate with them that we primarily rent to the fields. There's 3 soccer fields. If you will, Bluff Park, CC United has reservation priority or scheduling priority. So we haven't done football down there in a number of years. It is used by residents. They are looking for some type of, I would say, informal or formal arrangement where those fields would be kind of, I would say, almost similar to how the Black Sox run Swanson Field. They've asked if they could donate maintenance related to the upkeep of those fields. I've shared with them, I've asked to get some more details on what maintenance they'd like to do. The overarching anxiety point for me on this one is this: if they invest in that, will there be an expectation of continued maintenance at a certain level? And that ultimately is for the council to decide. These fields are dissimilar to Ironwood Park in that it's just kind of an open space. And so I would offer that they're used more by day-to-day by residents than the fields at Ironwood. But I guess I'm looking for some type of direction or feedback on how you view the use of Bluff Park. We did mention to them, and Brenda Good is working with them on how they run their fall tournament. There's been some parking and garbage related issues related to that tournament that we'll work through with them. But if you have any general sense on kind of how you'd like that park to be used, and if you felt comfortable with any type of arrangement related to CC United's use of Bluff and the fields.
I have some as a parks person. Go ahead as a parks person. So, with the Black Sox, I went through this with them a number of years ago with staff, and, they did a lot of upgrades there. And there was some pinch points, some pain points where when other people wanted to come in and use the field and how it was getting left by one baseball team to another. But I do understand that field up there, that's a higher maintenance area, right? Because you've got different things with the bases and how the pitching mound looks and all that kind of stuff. When I look at Bluff Park, that's really an open grass field. And I don't go there a ton, but when I have been there, there's usually somebody, people walking around outside of, soccer. And then, so I guess initially to say, okay, it's only CC United when they have the majority of what's going on there anyways. I mean, my understanding is that the majority of that time that we have scheduled at Bluff Park is already for the CC United, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when they talk about maintenance, I mean, if it's seeding and things like that, is that something that the city that maybe we didn't pay enough attention to there? That field needs a little bit more work than we've been putting into it?
Yeah, I asked their leadership if they could just give us a list of things that they'd like to see done. There's kind of been a little bit of I would say a communication breakdown because some of the feedback they're getting is related to Ironwood Park, and as you know, we've done a lot of work in Ironwood Park related to overseeding, aeration, and fertilization. It just is going to take just a bit for that to go. I'm waiting for them to get some remarks on Bluff Park. Just anecdotally, those conversations are related to, as you can imagine, sometimes there's pet waste, in there, and that's a frustration point for them, but
Do we have a doggy stand there, a pet waste stand?
I don't believe so.
Maybe that would be a good idea to
Yeah,
get one
we could do
there
that.
too, to help encourage that. There are also, soccer organizations, they will, but they don't like to take a field out of circulation for a year so that it can rebound a little bit from all of the use that they get. So have we talked to them about that?
No, my interpretation is they're looking for these areas to become dedicated soccer fields. So they really
Okay.
want either the city or through donations or their sources, make them dedicated soccer fields. At least that's my understanding. And so what that looks like is probably in the eye of who's looking at the field and what their available resources are.
So they are going to get you more information about what they're looking to do or wanting to do?
Yes, and what they have a parent who would like to provide, donate services, and I asked for can you tell me what those services are, because it might be in the city's best interest to do that on its own because for the good of the community.
Sure.
We just haven't got there. My interpretation is they don't really have it other than someone says they're willing to do it. But, I think the headline for me is that they're looking to do that and have a continuous the CC United put some work into this and it's going to be maintained in a certain way as a result.
I think for myself, I need to know what they're looking at doing to start with, because right now, to me, it's just a thought that's out there, so I don't have anything concrete that, whether it's something the city should maintain itself or if it's something that we might be willing to look at another group to do.
Anybody else thoughts?
It is heavily utilized by the neighborhood as a dog park. I know that just going down that road every day. So I never thought of it as a dedicated soccer field. I think it's morphed into that over the years. I guess I would need to know specifically what they want. It's not reserved for anybody else, huh?
They have scheduling priority, so
Okay.
other people could use it for different reasons. It's typically not, but I think you're spot on where people use it. It's just not for I think there was a understanding that maybe youth football was practicing down there.
Used to, for sure.
Right, but I don't think for several years that's occurred. I don't
If
think-
it is, it's not an organized
Right, but it doesn't prevent,
reservation.
a group from going down there. And
Or then you have kids going
Kids
down there
going
and
down,
trying to hook
right.
around.
Well, Thanksgiving Day
And that
football
happens
game
too.
taking
Yeah.
place in there.
I don't want to preclude, I don't know that I want to preclude other use. Because I do see it, well, I don't know who's reserving it, I haven't checked into that, but it seems to be utilized for things other than soccer, certainly by residents. But that may have no impact on the reservation system. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, that's,
Reed?
I think, you know, without specific details, it's difficult, but I think if the city has a minimum maintenance it's gonna do, if they are offering to go above the standard, right, I think the city should maintain, you know, I don't know, whatever the standard schedule is for seeding or watering or maintenance, right? Make sure it has the, you know, whatever our standard, right? If they're offering to go above that to maintain it, you know, at a higher level for their use or whatever, then I think we should consider it, but I don't think it would be let them take over the entire maintenance for the park, right? It would be the city is gonna provide this minimum level of, you know, whatever our regular park maintenance is. And if they, donations or whatever, want to go above that to maintain it at a higher level for their use, I think that's something we should consider, if that makes sense.
Just a question there, if we do that, that doesn't, I mean, we're not entitling them to exclusive
yes.
use, right?
Yes. Right.
That's what I would worry about.
Yeah.
I don't think formally, and
Informally, though,
informally.
we spent the money to do some seeding and painting and striping, and now there's football on my field?
Correct.
Yeah, I would worry about that.
That's what I was gonna say too. I don't hate the idea of public and nonprofit partnerships, but you've kind of
Yeah.
taught us like the unintended consequences. And maybe we try it on a trial basis. I don't want this to become a get off my lawn situation a year down the road. Because it is a public park and
Yeah.
it will, I have no desire to see it as anything but a public park in perpetuity. That said, and again, like maybe we try it out, and I think we just need to kind of set clear guide rails and boundaries of,
Expectations.
you know, like, yes, you can do this, but we're not gonna keep the Pershman's family tradition of playing football every Thanksgiving Day
Yeah.
in that park. We're not
Right.
gonna stop that. Boy, we're not gonna stop the problem of
We're not gonna lock and
Sure.
get it off.
Yeah.
dog owners who don't clean up after their pets, keeping them out of that, you know, like we can't solve those issues. But you guys are kind of the only ones who use this officially, so if you'd like to show the grass some love, like, let's work out, and there's probably some liability arrangements that we need to figure out to let.
Well, if they had a contractor, then, you know, they could, that contractor would say, work for the city, or not work, but it would have, you know, follow all the city contractor protocols with liability insurance and all that.
Don't use water from the fire hydrant.
Yeah.
They have a well at Love Parks.
Has that CCU asked for any like certain like amenities, or maybe that's been like have they said, okay, we want an extra garbage can, or we would like, you know, just a small bleachers, or
No, they haven't asked for any of that, that's all related
is
to.
that like I could accommodate, knowing that if another general use park asked for it, it's just a common thing, if it's in our budget, we would do. Like, we want a
No.
picnic table or
Everything has been related to field.
field conditions, okay.
I think we need a little more.
So what I plan to do is just ask them for like a formal proposal of what they're looking to do.
And maybe you can share that we're not comfortable with the handing them the keys to Bluff Park.
Exclusive rights,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I can just say that it would be, you know, the council would have to accept it as a donation of services, but that wouldn't necessarily preclude the community from using that park or, you know, reserving it at a certain time
Yeah.
or what have you, so.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Lynn and I, along with Aaron, Paul, Schultz, and Eric met with FEMA, had our flood response meeting, so we're working on gathering paperwork. Lynn's working with their grant software system to upload all the information. We also talked to them about the possibility of doing some hazard mitigation at Riverside Park along the riverbank. And so somebody from Aaron's team is kind of developing what we had imagined to be a conceptual fix to better armor Riverside Park. But wanted to check in with the city council on that. I know we've kind of talked about it. It was maybe a couple of years ago when we had Rhonda.
2019,
Roberta from Bolton and Mink's office came out to talk about Riverside Park and some of the erosion issues. So before we get too deep into, that's not a pun either. Too deep into Riverside Park, I just wanted to make sure, depending upon where they get their source of money, it could be anywhere from 75% funded to 90% funded, I think I recall, for grant proceeds. So looking for some feedback from
And this
council.
is to shore up the embankment?
Correct.
Okay. That would be nice. That would be nice to do. That park is more used than most people probably think it is. And just living down here, you know, we see it more, especially with the fishermen coming in and out. There's people who drive down there just to take a peek at the river every single day. Ditto sponsor.
Do we have any plans to do kind of like a post Barron Junction Trail post levy assessment of what we want Riverside Park to be, or what kind of amenities, right? Maybe, right, it's gonna be closed for basically 2-ish years on and off, so is that maybe a good time to kind of, with the new park opening up down by, the water treatment moving there, should just kind of at least get Aaron thinking or get started on what do we want it to look like in 4 years when hopefully there's a lot more people coming through.
Don't we already have that, like the prairie grass and the
Yeah,
maintenance?
I know we had some of that with the river greening thing, but is there maybe a more, right, theoretically, if there's a lot more people coming through the trail system, is there more opportunities for
Just
people
wanted to do another review of the plans at that.
I don't know, I'm just
I'm
thinking.
feeling a little time pressure,
Okay,
so
no
can we
worries.
keep the main thing,
Sure.
the FEMA flood
Okay.
response for that, so Brent is looking for.
I have a quick question on that. Yeah, I'm very interested in that and having it in a meeting. Do they separate like the stabilization of the riverbank and the boat launch? Or do they just really only pay attention to one?
Well,
Is the
We're
boat
not
launch more
having-
DNR?
we own the boat launch, but we're not having any problems with the boat
Okay.
launch.
There,
So
okay, that
it's
answers
not
it.
within the scope.
Got it.
It's
Okay.
closer to the entrance when you come over to go in, where that water, once the bridge came out, the water now hits it at a higher velocity because the bridge piers aren't there, like stopping up
Okay.
all of it.
I do.
All of it, right? Am I right, Mr. Engineer?
Good job.
But anyways, so it's sloughing off faster at that point.
Oh, okay.
For me, I'm interested in learning more if it's a grant opportunity. I remember that conversation distinctly from 2019, and I think we felt like, ugh, that's a lot of money for a piece of parcel that Mother Nature's gonna eventually take back sooner rather than later. Later rather than sooner, probably big picture thinking. That said, I think in 2019, I personally was feeling a higher priority on the levee project, which continues to be true, but we're significantly further along in funding that than we were back then. So I would like to hear more. I still don't know that I feel like that's the best use of our resources, but I have no idea what we're talking about dollar amount, so learning more would help me.
And then we are in the process through Lynn's good work to switch over to Loeffler for our IT service provider. So no longer will be using Marco. Is that effective
November 1st.
November 1st? And then we're testing out a new, what we're calling an agenda guide that we posted to the website and social media. So it's really the kind of the brother or the sister to the council rundown. So rather than just telling residents what happened, we're kind of trying to engage them prior to the council taking action by giving them hopefully some useful information and hopefully inspiring either a conversation, a telephone call, them coming to a meeting. Maybe Morgan, did you see it, the agenda guide?
Oh, there?
On social media?
On social media?
Oh, no, that's not.
Oh, there was a right answer there, Morgan.
That was a planted question.
Yeah. That'd been great.
I want to start off on an honest foot.
I know, that's huge.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
Yeah, you,
Okay, harvest
agenda
season,
guide, all right.
time pressure.
Big goals,
Okay,
big goals.
we're good?
Yep.
Okay, anything else for Brent? Moving on to council requests, any council requests? Thank you. Moving on to the enterprise fund budgets. Hey, Ms. Tschudi.
Thank you, Mayor and
We're good.
Council.
We're good.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Shoot.
I just, okay. Brent just told me to chill out, I'm so bored.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so this is the first time that we'll be taking a look at the enterprise fund budgets. And so the enterprise fund budgets are different than the general fund budgets, which is what we've been looking at. Because the enterprise fund budgets are funded through our utility rate fees, connection fees, and so on and so forth, not property taxes. So we're going to start by talking about the utility capital projects, and what I mean by that is capital being equipment, infrastructure, different things like that that are not funded on the operating budgets. So the number one is the well 2 tower 1 controls, and that will be funded out of the water capital. And we are upgrading to fiber. We've done a few different areas in the city where we're upgrading to fiber because we need to reduce the communication failures to our SCADA system. And the approximate cost for this is $155,000. The second item on here is the Spring Creek lift station pumps. This has been in our long-term plan as well. This will be funded out of the sewer capital fund. And there are 2 aged pumps actually in the Spring Creek lift station. The approximate cost being $70,000 for that repair. And believe it or not, we have some maintenance costs that come along with the street maintenance that are utility related. So think of lift gate valves, manholes, and other items related to utilities, so water, sewer, and storm. So every year we're going to allocate the following amounts to those street maintenance projects: $55,000, $45,000 for sewer, and $15,000 for storm. Just because it's fair, I guess, for the utilities to pay their portion of that street maintenance project. So,
We're already doing that, right? Because on the 4th Street one we just did, Aaron, I think we were replacing some
Yep.
main valves. And so we had,
yeah, now we're just kind of calling it out
sure, that makes
as
sense.
a capital item.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
excellent.
Number 4 is a newer item that has been added, which would be funded sort of equally out of the water sewer fund. So currently we're reading meters using where they drive through the city, and it takes about a day. And then they have to go back out and reread meters that didn't read or had errors, and so that takes about 4 hours the next day. So this item is a new meter reading system, which we would install 2 towers on different opposite ends of the city, and we'd be able to read the meters from a button on our computer. So we got a quote for that through Core and Main, and it would be about $189,000 approximately. Currently, most of the meters here have the technology to do that, and MXU is what runs on the outside of the houses, and that's what helps us read. We have about 850 homes that need to be upgraded to the current MXU so that we'd be able to do that. So that's kind of exciting.
But there's like Lynn had mentioned, considerable staff time involved with that, or
Yes.
then if a meter is missed, to drive it to that location. And it also, if I'm remembering this correctly, it also gives like the homeowner the ability to they can track their usage in real time.
And by the gallon instead of the 1,000 gallon. I mean, I could go into a whole presentation on the system. If we decide to go down this road, I would love to just do that someday for you, so.
So that 190
Yeah.
includes the upgrading the 850 homes.
That it does not.
Okay.
So I was still waiting on a quote for that.
Okay.
But I would like to have somebody else do that because we don't have the bodies to do that. Or we just go out and we read those 850 by driving until we get them upgrade.
Are they concentrated? Do they align with a certain era of?
I would assume so because of the age,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, sure.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
When you talk about the technology already in the meters, is it radio or cellular, do you know?
It's radio.
Okay.
And it will remain radio. We'd have our own frequency so that it wouldn't interact with other cities or other frequencies. So. So this is something we're already doing. We put away 150,000 in the water fund, 200,000 in sewer for oversizing. And you guys are familiar with the oversizing. That's when a developer comes in and they're gonna put in a certain size piping for water and sewer, and then the city says, you know what, we'll pay for the oversizing because we want it to be a certain size. MS4 improvements, we'll be having a presentation on that coming up here, but we are increasing our monitoring inspections and testing of stormwater systems, and hopefully have a good action plan for that coming up in the future.
Was that 75,000 the same that we had last year?
No,
Current
it's
year?
a good question. It's actually increased from 25,000. Yep,
We were
Yep.
forewarned that we're gonna see.
that's a good question.
Okay.
Good catch. So when we're talking about operating expenses, now we're talking about the actual budget. What are we gonna see on the operating expense budget? So you're familiar with the milestone classification and compensation study. So the effect on the water expense would be 59,000 if everybody went to the full milestone on January 1st. I'm gonna call it fire hydrant repair maintenance. We did some of that this year where we painted and repaired a bunch of fire hydrants throughout the city. This would be taking care of more of those.
And just to jump in there, so one of the things we don't have right now is a comprehensive hydrant maintenance schedule for painting, so with Craig Eldred's help from Bolton and Mank, along with Eric Menth, we're gonna be building out a citywide program where hydrants in certain sections of the city are painted, so it's more of a comprehensive approach rather than, oh, we need to paint hydrants, we just paint X amount every year and just keep moving through the community, so.
Thanks for that. And then the last item there is the debt service interest is increasing as well as the principal. And that's because of the debt service that we're taking on for 2024. Related to the 2024 utility project, which includes the water tower and then, what else did we do?
Well,
What else did we do this year? Generators, we did,
Generators,
well one, or
electrical components.
Tower 2, yeah, well 4. We did a lot of different items throughout the city, so. We're going to be increasing the engineering fees by 70,000. And basically what this is a reallocation of our general engineering fees and just reallocating them over to water where we feel it's more appropriate. We have an additional reliance on Bolton and Mank for utility support. As Brent just stated, this Craig Eldredge has been really helping us out in the water department. And so we're reallocating some of the engineering fees over to the water department. Bond issue expense. So if we issue debt next year again, we will have an expense for issuing that debt. I want to capture that on the operating expense. And that would be related to any sort of land acquisition if we do end up acquiring land in 2025. And then I believe Brent was able to reach out to all of the council members regarding a part-time utility billing clerk plan for 2025. That would add $18,693 to the water expense. For sewer, again, the milestone program, you would see an increase of $28,714 if all staff in the sewer department were able to reach that full milestone. And then the Met Council service, there's an increase, a 10% increase in that expense to us, which is a $41,000 increase. And that annual cost is over $400,000 just to put that into perspective for you.
And Met Council, we just have to do that, right?
Yes, correct. That's where we're sending off our waste.
Okay.
And then a lot of cities will have their own sanitary, wastewater treatment facility.
And
Not
is
a lot,
that
but
number like factored into our growth, or we would have just stayed the same as far as like usage or residents? Would it still be that amount?
Yeah, there's a flow meter, so we're
Oh, okay.
charged by flow essentially.
so it'll just keep going up. So,
We're down.
I was like, oh, that's only bad.
Down the drain.
Oh, one thing that Eric and Paul are starting to do in public services and in utilities is a lot more repair maintenance agreements. So being proactive rather than reactive. And so we have agreements coming up for generators as well as a lift station maintenance agreement. So we have many lift stations throughout the city, and we're looking at a $10,000 increase in our utility system repair maintenance because Eric is looking at doing an agreement where they come out and they check these annually. So that's where you'll see an increase there. I talked about the bond issue expense in the water. Sewer would have the same thing because that land would be parsed out to all of the different departments that would be affected by that land purchase. And then again, $18,693 for that part-time utility billing clerk. So just a visual for the more visual people. 24 is in the blue, 25 budget is in the orange. And this is revenues.
Do you have some, Reed?
Yeah, on the revenue.
Yep.
Did we shift some stuff from water that was reclassified, or why does our revenue drop?
So I think our revenues were over probably budgeted for 2024, and then for 2025 they're probably a little bit more realistic based on the long-term financial plan.
Okay.
Yep. And then the expenses, same, 24 is in the blue, 25 is in the orange. Here's the annual debt service, so water is probably the biggest payer of the debt. So at the end of 25, we'll be paying 1.3. This is the interest and the principal payments. And then the sanitary sewer is 158,000. And then the stormwater is 375,000.
When we're looking at those maturity dates, and I'm looking at the water, that first one,
Yeah.
maturity 2025, that means we pay it through 2025.
That's correct. That our last payment will be 65,000 in 25, and then we're done. And then it looks like we have another small one coming off in 26.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you're like, why? How are we going to fund all of this stuff? So usage charges is one of the items how we pay this. So I have the 24 rates on the left and the 25 proposed rates on the right. None of this is new. All of this information was included in our long-term financial plan last year, but it still might sound new because we haven't looked at it in a year. And it might be a little shocking because some of it, like for instance, the sanitary sewer base fee of $5, we've never charged a base fee for sanitary sewer at the city of Carver. However, it's common practice in municipalities and in utility bills. So that is one that I will point out is the $5.
And I would say the driving factor for the base fee for sanitary sewer is the need to construct a similar facility to Carver Creek Lift Station down here off of Main Street in Ironwood Park. And I think that's in, what year is that, in
34?
2034?
Yeah, we're doing the force main project in
But
29.
that's if you think of right now, basically, essentially, most of the city's sanitary sewer runs through that lift station onto Shakopee. We're gonna build a companion lift station on the north side of the community. So that's, I would say, the impetus for that increase.
And then to Brent's point too, when we're looking at those Met Council rates going up by 10%, we're trying to mitigate some of that, so that our rates aren't going up as high. But water went up 3%, sewer 5.5% with the new base rate. And then storm, last year it took a a large jump. This year it's taking another large jump, and then I believe we're trying to make it smaller for next year. And that's because that stormwater, if you recall, we were losing money in stormwater fund for the last many years. And that's where we have our debt service alone is over $350,000 annually. When we talk about connection fees, now this is where a new resident moves in, builds a brand new house, they have to get connected up to water and sewer. That's a connection fee. So 3%, 3%, 3%, but we are also proposing new trunk fees for water and sewer. Now, what do I mean about that? I'm also calling them a sewer access charge. So, like, just pick a word here. Like, are you going to call it trunk fee or sewer access charge? So, people call it all sorts of things in the industry, but here I'm calling it a water access charge of $1,800. Now, this supports huge infrastructure improvements in the next 2 to 3 years, and then beyond that. We're talking southwest, it could open up, and then also in the north. And once we install this infrastructure, development should start to roll. So those are new, and then those are charged at time of final plat. So the developer is more affected by those, whereas the connection charges is more the actual homeowner. Here I've proposed, or I've given you some examples of some bills. Again, you see the sewer base rate, which is $5, and then that family storm rate increasing of $6. So the increases range anywhere from 7 to 22%, depending on the bill. I will say with these do not reflect any sort of summer sewer average. So when it's 20,000 gallons used, it's 20,000 gallons of sewer. It's 5,000 gallons of sewer. So usually when a resident has a utility bill, they have a summer sewer rate, and that's usually somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000. So I say that their bill will likely be lower than this. Here is just a visual of the residential new construction. The new construction fees will increase by about 2% total in 2025. And then the developer fees, I just picked 25 lots just to throw out a calculation there. That's an example of like what a Brookview development would be approximately, and that's what the developer would pay to connect the WAC and SAC. Here is where we compared last year. We don't have current data for 25, but this is 24. The city of Carver to our peer cities for water sewer storm at an 8,000 gallon monthly usage.
Help me out here, this doesn't look good. So why are we so high compared to our peer cities?
Well, I will say that we say this kind of every year. So every city tells a different story, and some of these cities have their own wastewater facility, and so they're not paying the Met Council fees. And then some of them are more developed than we are. And so we are having to charge for, like I said, that infrastructure that hasn't been built yet, or that has been built and we have to pay those debt service payments on. So we don't always know the story behind them.
Like for example, like Corcoran buys water from the city of Maple Grove in some parts of their community. You know, I would offer like Waconia has been paying on their water treatment plant a lot longer than we have, and you know, it's built out. So the one story that Tammy and Jess have shared, and Lynn alludes to it, but as cities add to their infrastructure, they're going to go up on that scale. So we just added the water treatment expansion. By the time I think we get to our next one, we'll be lower on that list, and then we'll jump back up because we had to do another expansion. But I don't think it's wrong to say that we are higher. I mean, right now, there's not another way to explain it other than, but I would also say that we're not doing anything differently related to how we're treating water. You know, we talked about, I think, in other cities, like there's only so many ways to construct construct a water treatment plant and lay pipe in the ground. There aren't extravagances.
Or, as a couple people who I saw last week said, costs a lot to pay somebody to dig a hole.
Sorry, Brent, I cut you off.
No, that's essentially it. I mean, I think the exact, it depends on the city, but we are higher than peers based on the stuff that we're doing today. You know, and if we go, you know, real back to like you know, this has been shared, but maybe not recently, when the city constructed its original water treatment plant, 212 was not a reality or not even in a frame of reference for the community. And if we constructed it today, or if we constructed it 5 years later, we would have probably built it where Tower 2 is and expanded on it and built the future one onto it. And we end up having a very small one on a tiny parcel that we can't do anything more with. And those decisions based on those circumstances influence the decisions that the council's making today. And, you know, there are different things with topography and the number of lift stations we have. You know, it's kind of similar to the general fund where, you know, some cities have franchise fees, some cities contract for police. Some cities have community centers, so you can do it apples to apples. It just depends on the circumstances of that individual community.
So I felt like I kind of ran through that fast.
Sorry.
The enterprise fund budget is really tied in closely with the long-term financial plan, which you will see at the next work session as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this presentation tonight, or I can answer later if you want to email me. Happy to do so.
Do you guys have, so being mindful of time, I will start. I don't see many surprises in here because you're right, it aligns with a long-term financial plan. Are the rates what I want them to see? Are they what I'd like for them to be? No, absolutely not. However, I think that this is a mindful, smart plan because we are not going to have sticker shock when we need an expansion of the water treatment plant, when we need a new hole to be dug, when we need new pumps, new radios, new everything that was gone over in this. I saw a newspaper article from a newspaper near the community where I grew up, and they need a brand new, they call it water recycling center. It's their sanitary sewer water treatment plant at the cost of like $116 million. And what that is going to do for residents in this community is it's going to take their average water bill from $55 a month for 4,000 gallons to $165 a month. Because we're doing this, we're not going to have that sticker shock that made a bunch of you guys gasp when I read off those numbers. So, you know, Christy and I sat around the table when, I know I certainly got heartburn, but we started talking about the expansion of the water treatment plant and how we hadn't raised rates in a while and how we were going to be playing catch up a little bit. So, do I love this? Do I love charging and paying more for water? No. Is it a necessary evil? Yes. Is it mindful and is going to avoid sticker shock in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Yeah, and I think that this is the way to go. Any other thoughts, comments? Do we want to move this to the regular meeting so that we can continue to
Yeah,
discuss
we
it?
should just ask for more questions at the regular meeting if something comes up, if you don't mind.
Okay. Were you going to stay anyways? Do you need to know now if we have
You can
questions?
facilitate it.
He'll take the questions.
Okay.
I have some, and I think less than a minute. I already knew about the $5 base fee for sanitary sewer, so I support everything. And also because we talked about not having surprises, I will have to say I was surprised on the connection fee category, but the sewer access charge and the water access charge for developers. It's quite a jump but I support it. I just want to be prepared to, you know, give rebuttals to any opposition that might have, or, you
You
know.
know that those were the trunk fees that we've been talking about, right?
Yes.
What part surprised you?
Like I was gonna try to calculate it, like the percentage of increase, like if you look at it that way.
It's a 100%. I mean, we didn't charge them before the brand new fees.
Yes, yeah, I know that, so it's like, but, I mean, but I felt like we've always been really conservative about not, you know, increasing too much to the developers, because I feel like, I feel like I'm one of the few on the council that usually is opposite, like I'm usually the one pushing for that, and
The
so I
developers
support
bother,
it.
the developers bother me less than the residents. The developers are for homes that are coming in,
Yeah,
so it's like, you
yeah.
kind of have to pay your dues to put a new house here.
Yeah,
For me, it's the residents that are here now who are seeing these bigger jumps, that is
right,
more of a
and it's
hard one
not
for me
as
than the
big of a
developers.
jump, but it was that $5 I've already talked about, because we can't sustain that, we're gonna have a really shocking when we have to catch up.
Okay, we're getting closer.
Okay, let's, I will give the opportunity for more comments on this, because I know that there are 3 folks who didn't get to opine. But just, I want to really
worries.
save our now 7 minutes between
Yep, no
meetings.
worries.
So I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember Welsh,
Also,
second by Hirschman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Can't talk opposed. Same sign. Motion passes. All right.
were we expecting a bunch of?
I don't know, apparently, they're popular rules.
Are you sure? I can stay.
No,
Morgan, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
Stay till the meeting if you want.
I
If you
will. Next time,
have,
bring it on.
want to have more fun.
Don't tell me.
Sorry, no, you're fine.
He is a people's dog.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun. I retained a good chunk of it.